Hi, Dr. Becky here. In this video, we're going to talk about working with stressors. And so the first thing to know is that a stressor is different than the stress response. A stressor is that thing that sets the stage for a stress response. Now, stressors can be big or small. In the context of this current coronavirus pandemic, we'll be looking at general principles of working with some of the bigger stressors. So the first thing to think about is to identify the stressors in your life. And you may think that that seems easy because, of course, we've already said that the coronavirus is a huge stressor for most of us. But if you can look beyond that and see what might be the specific things, whether related to the coronavirus or not, that are stressors in your life right now. So, for example, related to the coronavirus, you might be separated from your adult children, from your parents, and this might be particularly stressful for you. You might have a loved one who is working in a high-risk area. You may be working in a high-risk area. You may be experiencing some of the financial fallout from this, or there may be other stressors in your life. So the idea is, as clear-eyed as you can, identify the stressors that you have. Now, some of us tend to ignore or to minimize stressors, and some tend to magnify the effect of stressors. This is not intentional, it's just strategies, and anxiety tends to make us more likely to do either one of those. So, as best we can, to kind of lay that aside and be clear-minded and see the stressors that are actually in our life right now. So then the next step is to identify the actual control you might have over each of those stressors. So there are some stressors you're going to have more control of and some you're going to have less control of. It's not an either or, it's not a black and white. We usually don't have total control of any stressor. We usually don't have no control of any aspect of a stressor. So, for example, with the coronavirus, we do have some control of our risk factors. So, for example, religiously washing our hands, practicing social distancing, doing the other practices and guidelines that we're given, that can lower our risk. On the other end of it, there's things that we can't control. So, for example, we really can't control other people's safety practices. So recognize as best you can what kind of control you do have for each stressor and what you don't. Identifying that will free you to let go of trying to control the aspects you don't have control of, and it gives you energy to actually come up with a plan for gaining more control of those aspects that you do have more control of. So it's not an all or nothing. It is a sense of recognizing the control that you do have. So after that, the next step is to develop strategies that might be helpful. The first place to look is strategies that have worked for you in the past, or maybe strategies that didn't work so well when you were really stressed. You're using wisdom to learn from your past, not with judging any of it, but just recognizing some things that might help. So that might be a first place. Look to your faith, family, friends for advice. You might read and research other educational material, look online. There are almost certainly other people who have had similar kinds of stressors, and some of the strategies that they've found that have worked for them may work for you. Ultimately, it's using wisdom to find out what is likely to work best for you. So you develop those strategies and then you begin to act on them. It's the actually doing something that is that power of actually giving us a little more control. So it's important to actually act on them. Now you're going to find some things work, some things don't work. So if they don't work so well, just go back to the drawing board and see if you can come up with some other ideas. So when we talk about this aspect of control, it's important to keep a balanced perspective about it. And so many people find the serenity prayer is particularly helpful in times like this. And just for a refresher, it goes like this. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. So it's important to know that acceptance in this context doesn't mean that it's coming to where you like something or you're glad about something. It does mean that you acknowledge the reality of the situation and you give up fighting against what you can't control. And again, this frees you to actually have more power. So use this process over and over again, identifying, recognizing stressors, recognizing the amount of control you may or may not have with each of them, looking for strategies for each one, acting on it, and then bringing acceptance as best you can for yourself throughout this whole process. I wish you well, and next time we'll talk about working with our stress response.